As spring rolls into East Texas, the noticeable change in the landscape is wildflowers. Among them, the state flower, the bluebonnet.
KLTV7's Bob Hallmark has some details you might not know about the history and whether you can pick them.
The green fields of spring now hold the arrival of wildflowers, and established as the state flower in 1901, the distinctive bluebonnet.
All the different wildflowers and the bluebonnets are just a beautiful, peaceful flower. I can just picture everybody stopping by the road and getting a picture taken in them.
Courtesy of TxDOT's wildflower program that seeds more than 5,000 native wildflower species along state roadways.
It's been for over 90 years that we've worked to conserve and preserve the wildflower species. It's about 800,000 miles of right-of-way that we have these seeds planted. The most iconic is definitely the bluebonnet.
It's never been illegal to pick a bluebonnet.
There's a lot of lore, I guess, around you better not pick that. It's the state flower. It's not illegal to pick a bluebonnet. From our perspective, it would be highly frowned upon.
While it's technically not illegal to pick bluebonnets, it is important where you pick them. Stopping along the shoulder could get you ticketed for road obstruction.
You don't want to go on someone's private property.
No picking on government properties like courthouses or federal land like state parks. They'd prefer that you don't pick them, but take a picture instead.
And if you want to take pictures with them, that's awesome. It's just, be careful kind of where you go, where you walk.
Bob Hallmark, KLTV 7 News.
The things you learn. TxDOT purchases and sows about 30,000 pounds of wildflower seeds each year to continue the program.